In this video series, we look at the topic of time recording. In CrewBrain, times can be recorded manually or by time clock, which will be shown in the next two videos. In this video, we will deal with the basis of time recording, namely creating a statement period. Because once an employee's work contract has been mirrored in the system, CrewBrain can create a payroll based on the data stored and times recorded. The statement period is created in the base data of the respective employee, under Statement and Time Recording. Here you can choose between two different statement types. One is a statement according to our flat rate or daily rate, for all that are accounted in this way. So this is, for example, for freelancers or mini-jobbers. For the permanent employees, you choose the time recording with flexi-time account. Only the new logic should be used. The older one will no longer exist in the long run. The new logic also solves some previous problems. Namely, surcharges can now be stored much more flexibly, and the automatic break deduction now also takes effect for shifts over midnight. Only from the date entered here, the employee sees the time clock and can enter times. Before that, the time clock is not visible. Then you enter the working days here, as they are also in the employment contract. Mostly you have a 5-day week from Monday to Friday, but this does not exclude that the employee can also work on the weekend or record times. These are the days on which planned working hours are calculated. Then you specify here the salary per month or hours. To have the calculation in the statistics even more accurate, you can also enter the non-wage labor costs here. Here you can choose between fixed and variable salary. The wage type is important for the tax consultant. Then you enter here the working time, which should be done per day or per month. If you enter the working time per month, the system can divide the hours into the individual working days. If you do not check this box, the planned hours per month will only be deducted at the end of the month, because the system does not know how many hours are to be worked per day. If the working hours entered or divided per day, you can leave the values for vacations, sick and holidays at 0. Otherwise, enter the corresponding hours per day here. Here you can create a flexi-time account. If the employee already has overtime, enter it here as a start value. Then breaks can be deducted automatically. The legal regulation for Germany is preset here. With this logic, the break deduction is also calculated for shifts over midnight. However, automatic breaks cannot be taken into account when calculating the additional wage components, since the system does not know when the break took place. Then you can work with capping, daily or monthly, to limit the maximum working time per day or per month. Or if it is agreed that a certain number of overtime hours are included in the salary. Planned days are only relevant if days have been agreed with the employee instead of a number of hours. Before I go into the additional wage components in more detail here, I will first finish going through this period. Here you decide if your employee has to record the working hours or if the planned hours of a job are used in the payroll. Here you decide how the employee may participate in the time recording. Here you deposit the vacation, as it is written in the employment contract. Here you can select the dative profile that you have previously created with your tax consultant under Administration, Time Recording, Dative Export. Since a permanent employee, for example, has a different profile than a mini-jobber. Last but not least, you can specify availabilities. For example, if someone worked part-time, he or she cannot be booked outside the periods entered here. Let's now move to the additional wage components that replace and expand our previous logic of surcharges. Besides the surcharges, it can also be used to map standby times, call-out times, or overtimes. You can add the additional wage components either individually per employee or centrally as a definition, which can then be used for several employees and also be changed centrally. Before adding the first wage component here, you must first create categories for them. This is done under Administration, Time Recording, Wage Components, Categories. Then these categories will appear here. I will now create the wage component for night work 40% as an example. The observation period is the day. The time account is of course working hour. Night work applies on all work days. On all official holidays. And applies to all time categories. The night work 40% applies in Germany from midnight to 4 a.m. Wage components usually apply to vacations as well. In my case, the surcharge applies to all job types. There are no guaranteed hours or a limit on hours in this case. However, the night work 40% is deducted from the night work 25%, as they are not supposed to apply simultaneously. So the percentage is just the 40%, and here you decide how the surcharge should be paid out. I save this. If you do not want to create each wage component individually for each employee, it makes sense to store a central definition that contains several wage components. You'll do that under Administration, Time Recording, Wage Components. I've created this before. It is called surcharges, and all the surcharges will appear here. These can then also be edited globally in the administration. The configuration of the wage components can be very complex. If required, our support will be happy to help you with the individual configurations of your company regulations. Let's take now a look at the statement according to hour or flat rate. Important here is again the valid date. Here you enter the work days again, as they are in the contract. Then you enter the standard wage type here, which is also used, for example, by our projection when scheduling the employees. In each job, the wage can also be changed individually. If an employee is only allowed to earn a certain amount, as for example with the German minijobbers, you enter it here. Here you decide whether your employee receives paid vacation or paid holidays. A consistent salary is like a flexi-time account, but on salary basis. Decide here whether your employee receives paid breaks. Here you can enter different wages per categories. If the employee earns the same in all categories, only the default has to be filled in. The hour wage can be scaled. Here you enter the guaranteed hours, here the flat rate wage, and here the daily rate, which can also be scaled. If all employees receive the same wage, you can also simply create a price list under Administration, Staff, Price List. Then you don't have to fill in the wages for each employee individually. Here you can define surcharges, also for special job types. Here again, you decide if your employee has to record the working hours or if the planned hours of a job are used in the payroll. Here you decide how the employee may participate in the time recording. Here you deposit the vacation, as it is written in the employment contract. Here's the Datev profile again that you have previously created with your tax consultant under Administration, Time Recording, Datev Export. And last but not least, you can also specify availabilities here. So, once the statement periods have been deposited, let's now look at the payroll CrewBrain creates when times have been recorded. Depending on how you are employed, you will find yourself either under statements for those who are employed according to hours and flat rates, or under time recording for those who are employed with a flexi-time account. Let's take a look at the time recording first. Here above we see, for comparison, the times, payouts, vacations and sick days for the last 3 months. Here we see the flexi-time account and the remaining vacation days. Under information, we see the whole thing again for the current month, plus the number of booked jobs. And under times, we can see a day-by-day list of the recorded working hours for the respective jobs, projects, tasks, or independent times. If surcharges or other extra payments were made in that month, they are listed at the bottom. Then we look at the statements. That's a payroll for freelancers and mini-jobbers, for example. Of course, you don't see a flexi-time account here, but the total balance. Under information, you see all the information for the corresponding month. And under times, you see all the jobs done listed with the recorded times. For freelancers, you also have the option of billing by job and not just by month. For times, whether by time clock or manually, is explained in the following videos.